Hey everyone, it's Amanda. Welcome back to my channel. If you notice a new background, it's because I moved. I'm in a new place, so we have a new background. Don't get used to this though, because I'm going to be changing things up. But anyways, today's video is really fun because it's going to be the first video in a new series on my channel called Stationery Showdown. The name sounds really intense and scary, but I promise you guys it's not. Basically, what I'm going to be doing is comparing different stationery products within a category and telling you guys my thoughts on each one, telling you guys the pros and cons and which one I think is best value. And I thought this would be kind of a fun idea and definitely helpful for you guys because you don't need to spend the money and try out all the products. I will do that for you and let you know which one is worth it. Hopefully you guys are down with this idea, but for the very first stationery showdown, today we're going to be comparing a bunch of different black fineliner markers. I thought this would be a good one to start out with because it's kind of standard. I use them pretty much every day for bullet journaling, for drawing, when I'm outlining my art, everything. They're just a very commonly used art tool, and I know I get a lot of questions from you guys asking which ones I use and which ones I think are the best, so might as well just compare them on camera for you guys. To keep things consistent, I thought I would keep it within felt tip pens, and I'm also only going to be comparing 0.3 thickness because I thought that would be a nice standard line width. 0.3 is the one that I use the most, so that's just what I bought for each of the brands. I have 9 different fineliner brands to compare, so let's see who's going to win the showdown. Our contenders for this battle are the Sakura Pigma Microns, the Faber Castell PITT Artist Pens, the Staedtler Pigment Liners, Staedtler Triplus Liners, the Copic Multiliners SP, the Le Pen Fineliners, the Stabilo .88, the Pilot Fineliner, and finally the Sharpie Pen. The first thing we're going to be testing these fineliners for is smoothness, which is something that I always look for in a pen because it does make a difference in terms of the ease in which you draw and as well as the shakiness of your lines, that sort of thing. Keep in mind that I am only using my Leuchtturm journal for this, but as you can see by this chart, the check marks denote the amount of smoothness. 1 check mark is smooth, 2 check marks is very smooth, and then 3 check marks is extremely smooth. There is an X on one of them because that pen was just not a fun writing experience, not smooth at all in comparison to the other ones. As you can see, the smoothest pens were definitely the Sakura Pigma Microns as well as the Copic Multiliner SP. These won by a landslide. The next test we're going to be doing is the bleed test. Now, when I was thinking of things that I wanted to test a pen for, of course, bleeding through the page is one of my priorities when it comes to a pen. So I came up with this test where I basically scribbled over the same area on the page, and the number of passes is the number of times that it took for the pen to bleed through. The one that I'm testing out right now, the Staedtler Pigment Liner, was one of the only ones that got really wet, and it actually kind of ripped up some of the page, as you can see on the tip of that fine liner. On camera, it's actually kind of hard to see the amount of bleed that shows up on the other side of the page, but I promise you that the bleed is definitely there. So the number that you see is the number that it took for the bleed to show up. I would say that this test was definitely one of the most telling and one of the more important ones to me because I like to go over my lines a lot or color in a block, especially when bullet journaling. So this one was one that I was actually excited to experiment. The two that I would say bled the easiest and the most would be the Le Pen Fineliner and the Pilot Fineliner. The Faber Castell one did bleed a lot, but it took a lot longer to get there, so I didn't really count that as a loss. And then the two that conquered the bleed test the best were the Sakura Pigma Microns as well as the Copic Multiliner SP because it took 10 passes for it to bleed, and even then the bleed was very minimal. The next thing that I wanted to compare is ghosting, and if you don't know what ghosting is, it's basically whether your writing shows up on the other side of the page, but not really in a bleeding sense like the bleed test. It's more of a faded ghost-like appearance, hence the name ghosting. So I will say that this does depend on the type of paper you use. There's a lot of different factors, but again, I'm using my Leuchtturm journal, the one that I always use. For this test, I wrote how I normally would with each of the fineliners, and then I flipped over the page to see if there was any ghosting, and generally I would say that they were all kind of similar There was pretty much ghosting on all of them, very minimal, but the two that stood out the most were probably the Staedtler Triplus as well as the Le Pen Fineliner. And actually I do have some insight on the Le Pen Fineliner because I have used it before, and I really had no issues with it back then, but later I noticed that the Le Pen Fineliner does this weird thing that as it ages, the ghosting gets weird and it bleeds even more, and it gets almost like a green shade. As you can see here, this clip kind of shows it. But anyways, on to the final physical test for these fine liners, and that is the smudge test. This is kind of a three-parter. The first thing that I did was draw a straight line with these pens, and then immediately after I kind of rubbed my finger over it. This kind of thing happens a lot, especially if you're left-handed and the bottom of your hand goes over your writing a lot, so I thought I would test that out. Again, nothing really significant. Some were definitely worse than others. I would say that the two best ones were the Faber Castell PITT Artist Pen as well as the Le Pen Fineliner, which makes sense because the Le Pen one is marketed as smudge proof, but the other ones, there definitely was some degree of feathering or a little smudge when I rubbed my finger over it. So then I kind of upped the difficulty level and I did a scribble, and I also pressed a little harder with my finger. I have to say that none of these pens passed the test. Maybe this test was just a little unfair, but as you can see, a lot of them smudged. Maybe I needed to wait for some time to dry, but then again, when you're writing, who really wants to wait for your pens to dry? Out of all of them, I would say the worst one was the Pilot Fineliner. The final iteration of the smudge test is me writing and then going over it with a marker / highlighter. I'm using the Zebra Multiliner, but I know that a lot of people do this, and there's nothing worse than drawing something or writing something, and then once you go over it with a marker, it gets ruined. So that's why I wanted to do this test. And there were two that were just really, really awful, and those were the Pilot Fineliner and the Sharpie pen. As you will see, it smudged really badly. Since these two failed the test, I put an X underneath them, and then I put a check mark underneath the three that withheld the highlighter the best, which were the Le Pen, the Stabilo, as well as the Pigma Micron. So before I tell you guys my winner picks, I wanted to show you guys the prices of each of these because of course this is something that's really important to factor in when you're buying anything at all. And I know that some of you guys are on a budget, but something to keep in mind is that I did buy these in single form, so each of these prices is the price for one pen, but a lot of these pens come in awesome value packs, and of course that'll make it cheaper. Anyways, the least expensive, ringing in at $1.15 at my local craft store, was the Stabilo .88, and the most expensive, ringing in at a whopping $10.59, was the Copic Multiliner SP, which does make sense because this pen is refillable, so if you run out, you can just exchange the cartridge. So it does have that edge over all of the other pens because none of the other ones do that. So maybe in the long term, you would be saving some money with this refillable pen. Alright, so to wrap everything up, I compiled all of the data that I collected in my experiments, and I have my favorites. Of course, this is my personal preference. If these are some of your least favorite pens, that is totally fine. My winner for best value at an affordable price is the Stabilo .88. This one really surprised me. It was new for me. I hadn't tried it before, but it held its own against some of the higher priced ones. The only thing that you kind of give up with the price is that it bleeds a little bit more easily. But other than that, I was really happy with my experience with this pen. The two that I would say are the best mid-range ones are no surprise to me, and that is the Sakura Pigma Microns as well as the Faber Castell PITT Artist Pens. You guys know I love these, I use these all the time, and now I feel like I'm validated because they really did pass all of the tests, especially the Pigma Microns. My final favorite is the Copic Multiliner SP. This one passed the tests with flying colors, but of course it does come at a higher price tag, and you kind of get what you pay for because it is, in my opinion, one of the highest quality pens, and of course you do have that refillable aspect of it. But there you go, these are the winners of this stationery showdown. It was a tight race, but these ones came out on top. These are all awesome fine liners to work with. I just wanted to showcase different fine liners in different price ranges for you guys, but of course at the end of the day you can create amazing artwork with anything. Alright everyone, so that was it for the very first stationery showdown. I hope you guys found it helpful and enjoyed. If you did, be sure to click that little bell button down below so you can be notified whenever I post a new video. And be sure to comment down below what you think the next stationery showdown should be. Should I do pencils, markers, paints, whatever you think. I will do that next time, but I think that's everything. I hope you guys have an awesome day. Thank you so much for watching, and I will talk to you in my next one. Bye, guys.